Damn it. Of course I had the mute on. There we go. Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now? There we go. All right. I obviously you can tell I'm a freaking live stream fish here. Just going with the microphone. So I guess I got to restart with my whole thing. But anyway, listen, I'm excited you guys are all here. There were 50 people here. Now we're down to 34, maybe because my mic was all messed up. But no, listen, I wanted to just mark the occasion. I'd spent 3 years working on this thing. Pretty much had been in a silo for a while, and wanted to just celebrate. And so I appreciate all of you kind of joining me to mark the occasion. I'm excited for it to be done. I've been sprinting for the last feels like 6 months since I kind of started the editing process, and listen, I thank you all for being here. I'm gonna answer some questions. I'm gonna give some behind the scenes kind of looks around the book, talk about the book content, answer some of your questions. And I know some of you are also here, potentially for a little discount. I threw that out in the newsletter on Twitter. So I'm not gonna wait until the end here. We're just kind of get to it. So let me throw this in the chat. You go to my website and put in this code, and let's see, make it easier for you. All right. So yeah. So go to my website, just put in the code event when you go into in the cart, 25% off. If you want a signed copy, there's a little note on the side for like shipping notes. Just tell me you want it signed and give me some details on who to sign it for. And then basically anybody that buys a book, I'll put into kind of a raffle and pick out one random person for a free one-on-one session. It's not even just the cost. Like I'm actually not taking on new clients right now. So, the one-on-one session is kind of a decent deal. The other thing is that, and maybe he's actually here. I did get an email from somebody who said, man, I bought the book Monday, would have loved to have known. I came up with this idea this morning. And so, yeah, I feel a little bad about that. I mean, I wasn't really thinking about it. But so the other thing I'm going to do is, if you are a member of my newsletter, so some of you are, some of you aren't, depending on kind of where you came from today. So go to the website, go to jaredtedler.com. There's a bunch of places where you can input your name into the newsletter. And if you're part of that newsletter, in 4 to 6 weeks, I'm going to do a free webinar for everybody that wants to come, and it'll be a chance after you guys have had it to read the book, to think about it, how it applies to you, and you'll be able to come back and ask some really good questions, get some personalized advice, get some additional feedback. So kind of best of both worlds here. One person will get a free session, and then everybody else that wants to, we'll do a free webinar and have some fun over there. The other thing is that on the website now, if you go to this page on the site, you can download a free sample of the first chapter, right? Same kind of deal. You just have to put your name in, but then of course you sign up for the newsletter and you'll know about the free webinar too. So, download a free sample of the first chapter if you haven't, or you're waiting for the book and you're excited about it, kind of wet your whistle a little bit. So that's all kind of the agenda stuff. Like I said, I really am kind of thrilled to be here, thrilled to have made it. I said 3 years is a long time coming. And it's crazy because like when I wrote the first book, I could not have predicted kind of how much my competence as a coach, would have amplified and jumped up. I can already tell that the same thing is happening now. The difference is that when I first wrote the poker book, I really had only been coaching for about 4 years. Now I've been coaching for 14 years when I started writing this book. And I had so much freaking content stuck in my head. I think that's why it took me so long. I mean, yes, I was traveling a bunch. I was traveling for esports. I was working with some institutional trading firms. I was working with some golfers and traveling a bunch. So, timing wasn't like a focused 3 years, right? But I had so much content stuffed in my head. It just took a long time to get out of my head. And I got to tell you, right, I think she's on right now, but my writing partner, Beth, I call out in the acknowledgments at the end. She was phenomenal. She was in the trenches with me for 3 years. And she helped to pull this stuff out of my head. And, Barry Carter with the poker book did the same thing. Beth, was there helping to make sense of what was coming out of my head. Cause the first time it comes out, most of the time it's jumbled nonsense. Sometimes I think it's freaking gold. And it turns out to be crap, and we got to work through it. And then about 6 months ago, we brought on an editor, and she, I mean, anybody who loves the book is going to be thanking their lucky stars that she got involved, because the book is so much tighter now. The system, right? My system is just so much tighter, and there's some backstory. I won't go kind of too deep into it right now, but the editor has done a phenomenal job. So I am not a natural writer. I am super grateful for the people that have helped me to do this, because it's hard. and I'm really proud of with how it came out. Like here it is in its flesh, running to the door when I knew it was getting delivered for the first time was pretty amazing. It's a special feeling, to cross this finish line. So I am really thankful you guys are all here to celebrate with me. Yeah, I'm going to kind of do a little bit more background stuff, but I want to answer a couple questions. Yes, there will be an audiobook. It is uploaded to Audible. I did the narration about a month ago. It actually was super helpful to talk it out and do it, kind of before the book was finalized. I definitely found a couple spots that were still a little rough around the edges. So that was cool. So yeah, the audiobook is loaded up to go. We're just waiting for this company called ACX, which distributed to Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, to just kind of give the thumbs up. So they say up to 30 business days. It was uploaded, 7. So, you guys will know as soon as I do, because Lord knows I will press every button I can. So I think there was another question. No. Okay. So one of the big things that happened in, trying to create this book, right? So I came from golf, transitioned to poker, right? Then traders start picking up the poker book and seeing how it applies, and telling me, all right, listen, just change the word trading to poker and you got a new book. And it's not really my style. It just felt fake, right? I mean, if I'm just going to do that, just keep buying the poker book and you change it from poker to trading. I started working with some institutional firms, some retail traders, did some webinars for some trading groups, and really just kind of started to get my feet wet and really kind of understanding the differences between the poker world and the trading world. And there are some pretty significant differences, both in terms of the application, how the strategies need to get applied, the circumstances. I mean, the scale of the variance and the volatility and the unknowns, the fact that the game can change at any moment is pretty crazy. So it's not, I mean, basically if you're a poker player, it's kind of like, getting to the turn and playing no limit, all of a sudden the game turns into PLO, right? And so the markets can be like that. There's a lot of challenges and complexity associated with that. So, learning really a lot about the market and understanding the way that traders talk about it, and, understanding the nuances. And yeah, of course, there's a lot of similarities. I mean, we're people first, poker players, traders, golfers second, right? So the kinds of problems that you see, the problems that I was seeing were really exactly the same. The differences were not that dramatic. It was just a question of understanding how traders think, understanding how they talk, understanding how the strategies need to be applied. But then, we start looking at the way that the general sort of trading psychology, the way that the traders talk about this material, and, my spidey senses start to tingle a little bit. And one of the biggest topics that really kind of jumped out in my mind was this topic of greed. And that was something that was really not really talked about in poker, not really talked about in golf. So it just sort of stuck out to me as something that I didn't really know that well. And one of the things I did for the book was to do this research. And I've done, a couple of these, Survey Monkey things where I just post a bunch of questions, get some research, and, it kind of helped me to dig in a little bit, understand sort of the nuances of where people were looking online, and just help me direct traffic a little bit. And then as I got really deep into it, I kind of developed a thesis about greed. And I'm going to read a section of the book that I think kind of epitomizes my thesis here. And what I will say is that the thesis was then tested during a second round of research, and I think I had like 60 traders fill out a very detailed survey. So actually 2 surveys, a survey and a questionnaire. And there was just sort of nothing new that was popping out as I was kind of getting into it. So here's a section of the book about greed. It's on page 56, right kind of at the beginning of the greed chapter. While the whole point of trading is to make money, greed actually costs you money. Your unrestrained desire to make more forces you into decisions that in the long term makes you less successful. The market punishes your attempt to squeeze out every penny and make the maximum return from every trade. Of course, that's not always the case. Sometimes greed is rewarded with massive winners or perfect exits, but you wouldn't be reading this if you didn't think greed was a problem. Right? There are a lot of theories and debates out there about the positive or negative role that greed plays in society at large, but that debate is beyond the scope of this book. My focus is simply on improving your execution and performance as a trader. And for many of you, that means curbing the damage that greed does to your profitability. That may seem counterintuitive to the generations who grew up on Gordon Gekko's famous "Greed is Good" speech in the movie Wall Street. Only we must remember the full quote. Gekko's actual words are, "The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good." For lack of a better word is the point of distinction. Ambition is the better word. Okay. Page 56 there. So ambition, that, like, when we look at what greed is, okay, and I go on in the next section called The Nature of Greed, where I'm essentially saying that greed doesn't exist in the way that traders think that it exists. I'm not saying that you don't experience that emotion. I'm not saying that it doesn't cause problems. What I'm saying is that we would never say that, Gino Auriemma, the coach of the women's UConn basketball team that's won 10 NCAA championships, Tom Brady who's won 7 Super Bowls, Jordan who's won 6, NBA championships. We would never say that those athletes or coaches were greedy because of their ambitions, right? We applaud it. I mean, listen, I'm a fan of watching high-level performance. I'm a fan of dominance and of people who have been great for a long period of time. I think we ought to be studying, and I feel like I do study, those types of people because it gives us a lot of insight in terms of what it takes to be great at that level. Okay. Now, the thing is, we don't talk about that necessarily in trading because we're talking about money. And because of that money, then there's a connotation associated with it, right? But if we look at greed as a performance problem, then we're really just talking about where does that line get crossed between where ambition is, excessive, and it causes you to, make mistakes, do things that are suboptimal for your, execution. And that to me is really, the essence of what the greed chapter is about. It is unique in this book. Okay. For those that don't know my work very well, what we're really after is isolating these underlying performance flaws. Okay. They are the real problem, right? When we're talking about, issues like greed and fear, FOMO, anger, mistake tilt, confidence issues, all that emotional stuff, those emotions are signals. They're indicating a problem. They are not the problem. That's a very important distinction. Emotions are not the problem. They are a signal. Okay. And in the book, I go through in great detail about all the different performance flaws associated with each of those emotions, except for greed, because it ain't unique. And that's the point. Okay. And the thing is, like, if we look at like where those points are, where ambition becomes excessive, from the outside looking in, you can't know if somebody else's actions are actually greedy, right? It's hard to observe somebody and say they're greedy. Now, let's say we're watching sports and you see, in American football that, a lineman tries to, pick up a fumble and run with it, right? It's a risky play. Maybe he saw it was an opportunity. Maybe he wasn't trying to be greedy and turn something, into, basically make a play, right? Or, you take a golfer trying to hit a shot that, it's a little too risky for him to. So, in those situations, from the outside looking in, it's hard to know whether or not it's greed. Hard to know what emotion's actually kind of causing that decision. You as the trader, you as the person need to determine that. And so, yeah, I will in the book, you'll read about, the different, kind of characteristics that, epitomize it. But at the end of the day, really what we're talking about are performance flaws that are far more associated with fear, anger, and confidence issues. And what you'll see in the book is, well, for one, there's 17 traders who are featured in the book. And 4 of them, each of them came to me with for coaching saying, I got a greed problem. Now, they mentioned a couple others, but as we got into it, greed actually was more associated with fear. Greed was more associated with anger. Greed was more associated with overconfidence or lacking confidence. So at the end of the day, like, there are not any unique issues related to greed. In my opinion, we could essentially say greed is just not a problem. I'm not going to go that far. Like, we know that it is, but when we're talking about the research that I did and the time that I spent really thinking about this, I think this is kind of one of the more unique points, about the book for the trading world, right? And that's kind of one of the things that I end up doing or attempting to do is try to, in essence, be like an anthropologist, sociologist, studying the culture, right? Study the poker culture, study the trading culture, and here we are, right? Able to kind of understand some of the details and nuances, that are hard to do from, when you're kind of immersed in it. I mean, I myself, right, seek outside counsel and advice, both from people like an editor or assistant writer, but also, coaches and therapists myself. So let me answer a couple questions. See, there's some things in here, but awesome. Just got the book delivered. That's amazing. Didn't age a bit in 10 years. I don't know, man. It's there. There's some gray hair. I got a 6-year-old working hard, but I appreciate the good words. I'm never gonna say turned out a good compliment. So thanks, guys. Is going on tilt in poker identical to trading? I mean, in some ways, the causes of it, right, the underlying performance flaws that are associated with it, 100% are, right? The ways that it shows up, the things that traders say, you can kind of look parallel to parallel about some of the injustices, about the hatred of losing, the hatred of mistakes. I'd say one of the big things that kind of changed in this book compared to the poker book was the topic of entitlement, the topic of desperation, and run bad tilt. In the poker book, I described these 7 types of tilt, and that kind of changed, right? Traders don't typically talk about running bad in the same sense. They talk about obviously being on in a drawdown and or a sideways market or kind of being sideways with their P&L. But the topic is talked about differently in poker. It's much more of a discussed term widely. So I didn't want to kind of call that out as a separate type of tilt, because at the end of the day, really what that section was kind of highlighting is that the reason that run bad tilt exists is because there's just so much negative variance happening in such a short time frame that it becomes, all of your underlying issues, especially tilt, become more concentrated and more intense. So it's not like run bad tilt is a unique cause, right? Unless you're having, significant issues with the topic of variance, but that's sort of talked about in different places, like, kind of hate losing. So that kind of went away. And then the topic of entitlement tilt, listen, I made overtures in the poker book about how it was really, kind of connected to overconfidence. And I just sort of, eliminated most of that section and just said, all right, here's, 3 paragraphs and it's all about overconfidence. And oh, by the way, the next chapter is about confidence. So just go right there. And then desperation, in the 10 years since the poker book, I realized that desperation was really not just isolated to tilt. I found that desperation, really also occurred with fear, right? And that there's sort of at times like a desperation for certainty. And that's kind of one of the characteristics that we sort of most describe as being associated with fear, right? If you have certainty, you do not have fear, right? Those things cannot coexist, right? Uncertainty in some respects is the antidote to fear. So anyway, those are kind of some of the big changes, from the tilt side. But yeah, in terms of the ways that shows up, traders definitely go on tilt. And in my mind, like when we look at, a lot of the mainstream media and the way that people tend to talk about emotions in trading, we're talking about this like greed and fear index, right? And there's a little freaking thing that, oscillates back and forth between, how the market's, behaving. That's too freaking simple. Okay. The market is not just about greed and fear. I mean, I just talked about, greed. And again, there's still societal impacts that come into the market, and that's real, right? But at the end of the day, it's not just about greed and fear. Anger is a massive problem, as we were just talking about. Confidence problems are massive, right? Whether it's overconfidence or lack of confidence. And then we've got, discipline issues. And, discipline's a whole other topic. But, another big change, I think, in terms of what's out there in the trading world is that, discipline is oftentimes used as the excuse for the emotional issues that exist, right? It's like, oh, I violated my trading strategy because I'm just not disciplined, or I got to get my discipline under control. I got to control myself better. It's like, well, if there's actually emotion back there, right? If you're, let's say, moving your target, right? You're exiting a trade early because you're fearful there's going to be a pullback, and you don't want to lose either what you've gained, or you don't want it to retrace all the way back to your stop loss. That's not a discipline problem. That's probably fear. Or maybe there's a confidence issue in there, right? You don't want to lose another trade, and you're in a bit of a drawdown and kind of questioning things for yourself. And so that's not a discipline problem, right? And so whether it's overconfidence or anger or lacking in confidence or fear, very often the things that traders associate with being about discipline are not about discipline. They're about those emotions. Because if those emotions are running hot, they short circuit the part of the brain that allows you to be disciplined, right? So the way that the book is structured is we go through, kind of the beginning material, which I'll get to in a bit. Chapter 4 is greed, 5 is fear, chapter 6 is anger. We get to confidence, right? And then we get to discipline, right? If you've solved a lot of the stuff, understood a lot of the emotional kind of impact on your execution and decision making, then we can start to look at the specific discipline problems, like being overly results oriented, lacking a little bit of focus, or lacking a little bit of focus, or being a bit too lazy or procrastinating. Things like that get taken care of a lot easier once the emotions are sort of checked off as an issue. All right. Other question: does margin trading accumulate mental weeks quicker? Yes, it does. I mean, I think anytime you're playing with bigger stakes, so to speak, you can expose things a lot faster. What's the best way to utilize the book? It kind of depends on where you're at with the material, but I would say for somebody who's new to it, read it sequentially all the way through. You don't have to read through every section as you get kind of deeper into the problem chapters, right? So, for example, in the fear, I'll actually just pull it up, make it easier for me. Right, in the fear chapter, okay. After some introductory material about some intro on on fear, the nature of fear, some of the common symptoms or signals of fear, like risk aversion, and then kind of going through this mapping process. Then we're going to get into the fear of losing, the fear of mistakes, and in those subsections, it gets kind of deep into very isolated performance flaws. Okay, you don't have to read through all of those if you find that you're just not really dealing with fear. But I would suggest you at least, get at least a taste of kind of what the material is about, because very often people kind of falsely assume that these concepts or material doesn't really apply to them. And kind of once you read some of the descriptions, I think one of our friends here mentioned it earlier, right? You really sort of it's designed to really kind of see yourself in the material. If you don't see yourself, it's probably either not applying to you in general, or it's not the biggest problem for you at that time. So it's fine to just skip it and kind of move on to the next chapter. But I would read through it as much as I just described sequentially, and then go back through and really kind of zero in on the particular areas that are most applicable to you. That's how you're going to get the most out of it. And make sure that you read my final thoughts a couple times. Okay. It's going to take work. Okay. Some of you have bigger issues than others, but the bottom line is the reason I like the term mental game, right? We're not talking about mindset. Okay. The reason we're talking about mental game is because there's a dynamic to it. There's a strategy to it, right? You can't solve trading. You can't solve poker, although I guess we're getting a little bit closer there. You can't solve golf, right? We can't solve these high levels. So you have to go through and continually, work through these problems. And as I said before, the editor who I worked with, and actually got some coaching myself, some business coaching. And one of the things that business coach said was, she didn't get what I was all about. She didn't get what I was trying to accomplish. And, started thinking about my system. And that's really what got conceptualized in the book. Once you learn the system, it becomes so much easier to actually work through future problems. So in a way, the book becomes a skill in itself, right? You're going to be able to be empowered to solve future problems. And I do not by any means profess that this book has all the answers, right? But if you think about it as being sort of the central organizer for things, giving you the system, right? I mean, listen, a lot of you have systems for how you trade. This is a system for how you work on your mental game, so you can find the opportunities to get better. Once you learn that system, right, you can incorporate any advice that you've read from a lot of the other great books that are out there, right? So this book is unique in the market, right? I'm not a trader. I've studied them, and the other thing is that I think a simple way of distinguishing this book to the others is that this book is not sort of a collection of advice based on experience as a trader. This book is a system that incorporates a process for how to solve problems to the point where they are resolved, right? You do not want to be constantly having to manage your emotional issues in real time when it matters, where you got to pull the trigger and fire off that trade or get out or make some decisions. You cannot be battling yourself, right? Just like, we saw Hideki Matsuyama win the Masters, right? I mean, we can debate, maybe you got a little lucky that, Xander, tripled 16 there and gave him a little bit of breathing room. But the reality is, like, in those moments where you got to execute, you can't be battling yourself. It's just the pressure is too high. So being able to resolve the problem. So in that moment, you are free to focus on the markets, focus on how your system or strategy interacts with the market so you can profit. The emotions have to be solved. That's the goal. That's what we're after. Okay. So in order to get there, you got to work at it. And there's just, you can't become a good trader overnight, right? You can't watch some, YouTube equivalent of this video right now and think that you're a good trader. I mean, well, I guess you could think it, but you're not going to be, right? So you got to do the work. And that's, I think, the best way to work the system. So other questions here. I love the activity here, guys. For the most part, trading solder, challenges. It gets really boring when the markets are stuck. Any thoughts? Yeah. I mean, for one, come up with a list of things that you want to be researching and thinking about. I mean, you don't have to be in front of the charts at all times, especially if you got alerts that are set up, where you go through some kind of cycle. And yes, I am recording this, so this should be posted live anyway. So, come up with a list of ideas that you can be working on during sideways markets, right? You don't know when they're going to show up, but there oftentimes are a lot of ideas or things that you think about that you want to be researching, and having to do it after market hours is not always the best time to do it. So I would say have a list of stuff you can do. Sometimes it's just get up and walk away and take a break, reset yourself. I think one of the key things is being able to keep your mind as clear as possible. Now, I really don't recommend that you take long breaks. I mean, I think especially for somebody who's actively trading, you do need to be there. So when I say a break, I mean like 2, 3, 4 minutes. And if it's tough to maintain that kind of focus and discipline for a long time, then think about it like you're training your mental endurance to be able to do that. Okay. And think about that like, okay, if you're able to do it for, short periods of time, figure out what your baseline is and try to grow it. So, all right, you're day trading futures live. So there is little research. Yeah. Okay. But there may be aspects of your system that you're looking to evolve. And maybe there's, opportunities to do some back testing. And if that's not the case, then maybe it is just like kind of learning to be more idle, be more sort of patient in what's going on in front of the screens. And if that's difficult, right, maybe it's not a discipline issue or a boredom issue, right? Maybe it is a function of something emotional, or it could be a lack of connection to your goals, right? And understanding that, you need to be here kind of ready to go. As I say in the book, it's kind of the backup quarterback mentality, where you have to be ready, right? You don't have to be kind of locked in and hyper focused, but you need to be kind of ready in not like an idle neutral position, but like kind of ready to hop in and make some trades when they come up. So, all right. Are there any ways you can increase your willpower through other things in a day-to-day routine? Yeah, I mean, and that actually is, fairly well outlined in the discipline chapter as one of the common strategies. And the easiest way to describe it is that you got to think about willpower like a muscle, right? You got to train it. And where does it come from? I think when we talk about topics like willpower or mental strength, that it hasn't had a very strong kind of operational definition for a while. And for me, it's just all about like the strength of your connection to an idea. So if we're talking about boredom, maybe the strength of your connection to your goals is what keeps you focused because you need to be ready. If we're talking about willpower, right, what is the strength that you feel connected to your goals in that moment? What is the strength in terms of your what you're trying to accomplish in that moment? If you're having difficult times, like being in a drawdown, what's going to keep you focused and motivated, right? Maybe it's a strength to some belief, so there could be some weakness and confidence. But yeah, discipline is really all about willpower, and training willpower is either like a muscle, or it's like an endurance thing. All right, audiobook is the exact same as the book. I will say my dyslexia acted up a little bit in there. So there's a decent number of words that are not exact. I mean, if you're reading the book while you're actually listening to me talk, you'll notice a decent handful of them, but we went back and edited all the stuff that would have materially changed the content. So yeah, no, it's the exact same thing. Any advice for cutting losses faster? I mean, it's not simple. I think that's like the essence of what this book is about. You'll see right in the first chapter. And like I said before, if you haven't done already, you can go to the website and download a sample of the first chapter, and you'll see, here are a bunch of individual kind of performance flaws individual trading mistakes, right? Not cutting losses is an example of it. But on the surface, we don't know exactly what's causing that repetitive mistake to occur. Any one of those emotional problems could be the cause of it. So, it's really up to you. If you want to give me some more sort of feedback on it, in terms of what you experience, I can give you a little bit more now. But the main point, though, is that any one of those issues could cause that. And we can't know just from the idea that you're, having trouble cutting losses faster as to why that is. Just to kind of pivot a little bit here, the way the book is structured, right? So I think one of the big evolutions for, this book over the trading book, over the poker book is, how the chapters are kind of laid out to really kind of mirror my system. As much as 6 months ago, the trading book was almost sort of going to match the poker book in that the first chapter was the introduction. Then we were going to go through some foundational material. Then we were going to kind of get into background on emotions, then the system, and then we get into the problems. And what the editor and, my assistant writer and this coach of mine kind of helped me to realize was that, the book needed to kind of match the system. And so we actually spent a lot of time, moving things around and reworking the way that the structure was so that it would have more of a flow to it. And so right out of the gate, and, my advice to you about how to, avoid cutting losses or how to cut losses faster is to study the pattern, right? To actually spend time mapping the pattern, right? That is what chapter 2 is all about. Okay. Your problems that you face constantly, they exist in predictable ways, just like the patterns that you see in the market that you're able to profit on. We just need to sort of take that skill and turn it back on yourself and be able to identify the thoughts, the emotions, the physical signs, the changes in your decision-making, the changes in your perception of the market, the things you say out loud. You map all that stuff. It gives you kind of real-time feedback to know that you're kind of heading for trouble. And that is the number one way you can begin to make progress, is to be able to see that stuff in real time, because you can't stop a problem you can't see, right? You can't profit in the market if you don't see the opportunity. I mean, that's the difference between you and me, right? I see all the opportunities when I'm talking with my clients, right? In terms of what they're saying, indicates a problem that I can then use opportunistically to help them. Okay. You see patterns in the market to opportunistically make money, and that's what you do. So we're doing the same thing. And this book is going to train you on how you can do that for yourself. What is the biggest problem for most traders? I don't know that there is a single one. I would say it's probably actually not one of the 5 that I talked about, right? Greed, fear, anger, overconfidence, lack of confidence, or discipline problems. It's probably actually that they think they know what their problem is, but they actually don't, right? Or that they are not actually actively working on their mental game, actively working on this side of the game. I think, my observation in the trading world is things kind of tend to go in 2 directions. Some are kind of overplaying the importance of psychology, right? Some say that trading is 100% psychology, which is complete nonsense. Okay. There's a great quote that is very often misquoted in golf. It was from Bobby Jones, who was the greatest amateur golfer of all time. He won the U.S. Open, the U.S. Amateur, as an amateur. Now, of course, this was 80 years ago, but basically he said that competitive golf is 90% mental, effectively. Like the game is mainly mental when we're talking about high level competition. Now, that quote is often misquoted because they forget the word competition. They forget the word competitive, and they just say, oh, golf is 90% mental. That's complete horseshit, right? Golf is not 90% mental. You need to be able to swing the golf club in a repeatable manner to strike the ball to go where to have it go where you want it to go. And so to suggest that trading is 100% psychology is either like just ignorant, or it's not really distinguishing psychological processes like decision making from the psychological, mental, and emotional things that we're talking about, that I talk about. So if we're going to say that trading is 100% psychology because it exists in your brain, then sure. But how is that helpful? I don't think it is at all. I think what we really have to do is break these things apart and say that for some traders, at some times, trading is more mental than at others, right? And actually, there's a client featured in the book who, one of the biggest insights for him that helped him right at the beginning of the fear chapter was when I said, for you right now, trading is 10% mental and 90% technical. He just wasn't good enough at that moment. He was having too much hesitation and doubt at the time where his execution, needed to happen. And it turned out that as he actually thought through what those doubts were about, his strategy and system got better. I mean, so, it wasn't a mental problem. It was showing up as fear and hesitation, but it had more to do with the problems in his system than it did for his mental and emotional sort of side of it. So anyway, trading is not all about psychology, and it's not all about the technicals either, right? So I think one of the biggest problems is that especially traders who are making repetitive mistakes, they don't realize the impact that emotions have on their outcome, and they think that they can just kind of learn more, keep working on their system, et cetera, and kind of outrun these problems, or they'll reach a point where they become so good that they just go away. And I'm sure for some of them that is true, but they don't really have kind of bigger issues. For the most people, it's just that, to me, that's just a very inefficient way of going about it. All right. Yeah, we'll kind of keep going through some questions. You guys are asking some great ones here, which is fun. How much similarities or same types of issues do you see in mental game within poker, trading, esports, etc.? Are the processes usually similar, or are they vary a lot between fields? No, I mean, that I kind of alluded to that earlier. The same stuff happens in every performance environment because we're people first. It's just the circumstances and the details that differ, and I think to have an impact, you got to kind of get in somebody's head, right? And I think that's one of my skills, is being able to kind of reflect somebody's experience. I have it a lot when I'm working with clients. I think it's just sort of, if I were to talk about talent, right? I'm not kind of naturally gifted in this regard. I've had to work really, really hard, but I think I've got a good sense of people. And so, my intuition, it gets really, really kind of tuned on, when I'm with a client and just kind of parsing through, the things that they're saying to be able to, understand how to help them. And that's what's represented in the books, is kind of an aggregation of all of that material. So, to be influential with somebody, I just need to know those details, need to understand the conditions of competition, and we kind of go from there. Okay. What other things I want to say? Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things I want to kind of talk about too is just, kind of the impact of the pandemic here. For me personally, I've been very lucky. I know for a lot of people it was kind of very damaging, both from a professional standpoint, from a personal standpoint, health wise. So I'm like very just kind of lucky and grateful that, live in a first world country. I mean, can't we really say that entirely with the U.S. and how we've handled the pandemic, but we've done the best we can, I suppose, right? But lucky in that my business was somewhat pandemic proof and able to kind of work on online quite easily, but also really kind of gave me the time to work on the book a lot and I spent a lot of time with my daughter, who I did want to show this because I was pretty proud of it this morning. This was her rendering of the book cover. So anyway, okay. So back to your questions. You guys are asking a lot of good stuff. Will there be an ebook format? Yes, it's already out now. Kindle, Kindle, iTunes, Kobo, and Google Play. You can go to the website. Here, I'll drop you the link once again. There's links there for where to get the audiobook and softcover. And once I get the links for the audiobook, it'll be there too. Okay, what are the best practices for successful traders? I mean, I think the best practices for successful traders is very similar to the best practices of the best athletes in the world, the best performers, whether they're actors or artists. Performance is performance. So when we look at that, I think the best of the best are just ruthless about their weaknesses. They are not in denial of them. They fully embrace the fact that they're going to suck at times, and they're not shy about it. They're not going to back off from it. They want to know it. They actively seek out that information. And it's kind of funny because, the people who I'd say are kind of like several steps behind that, they tend to have the hardest time dealing with their weaknesses, right? And that ethos of, it's sort of weak to know your weaknesses, right? It's weak to be weak, kind of predominates. And the irony is that's the stuff that holds you back. So, there's not, a lot of, I think, kind of like mysticism in terms of what it takes to be great. There's a lot of great books out there. The Talent Code is a great one, Daniel Coyle, in terms of like what it takes to be an elite performer. So, you got to put the work in, right? Talent is just not going to take you all the way. You have to do the work. And the question is like, what are you working on? And I think sometimes it's easy to kind of forget about working on your weaknesses. All right. Question that kind of came through my newsletter email earlier today. Is it possible to become good if you've had cases of desperation? Yes, it is. Now, desperation, as I mentioned, was kind of some of the bigger, issues in the poker book. It was more about tilt. In this book, it's more about confidence, right? Desperation shows up as tilt, shows up as greed, shows up as fear. But at the core, it's really about confidence. And, there's a cool story in here about a trader that I've worked with for about a year, right? Desperation is a difficult problem to solve, but it's one that can be solved, and he's proven it. The process is arduous. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline, which is tough when you've got emotional issues that are breaking down your discipline, right? But I think you got to be willing to do the preparatory work in terms of your kind of immediate, warm up before the session, and a way to evaluate yourself afterwards. But yeah, desperation can be solved. It is by far the hardest issue, to solve. And for some of you, it may include having to see a therapist. And I'm pretty clear about that in the book that sometimes you do need to seek outside counsel, right? The book can sometimes only take you so far, and if the issues get personal, then that's where you got to go. And kind of on that topic, right? The last section of the book, spoiler alert here. I tell a story about a client whose issues were very personal, and I kind of acted as a therapist for him in that regard. Not entirely, because he had a therapist and we were doing some outside work that way. But the point was that his issues, showed up in trading. They were not trading specific issues; they were personal. But 99% of the book is all about these performance problems that can be dealt with that way. Is there a way to get a signed copy? Funny you should ask. That was one of the promos from earlier today. So yeah, basically this promo is going to be only good for, let's just say, the end of the day. Basically just go to my website. You'll get 25% off. Just use that code event. And then in the shipping comments, just make sure you indicate that you want it signed. Give me some details about who you want it signed to, and I'll get it sent out. I should give you guys a bit kind of a forewarning. I'm sold out, at least of the stock that I have. So I'm waiting on another little shipment here to my house, and we'll get some shipped out hopefully by the end of the week. But worst case on Monday. Okay. Do you deal with impulsive thoughts to rule break in the book? Yes. But again, as I was talking about with discipline issues before, right, these impulsive thoughts sometimes are more connected to the emotions than they are just about discipline, right? So you have to kind of tease out, right, what's the sort of the source of these impulsive thoughts, right? A lot of times it's the emotion that is creating that impulsivity, right, and forcing you to have those thoughts. And it's not really about, a discipline issue, per se. Okay. Can you give an example of a strategic reminder? Not really a good one, to be honest. They're pretty specific, in terms of, which traders, or what traders use for them. But the strategic reminder, for those that aren't aware, is sort of like kind of the tool that is used in real time to help get yourself kind of back trading well after the emotions have kind of compromised you a little bit. So, you kind of go through this process to get control, try to contain the emotion in the short term. But if you do that, that doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to make great decisions. So I think what you want to be doing is identifying the common mistakes that you make in those spots. Give yourself some reminders about your strategy or your system in terms of like what you are looking for. You can go through your decision-making process and write it out, kind of in its entirety. You can also just write out kind of what goes missing. Maybe there are, kind of certain features that are missing. But, if any of those things are hard for you to kind of nail down kind of perfectly, what I would say then maybe there are some kind of holes in your understanding about what your system, what your strategy is really all about. And you just want to spend some time kind of being reflective about more on the technical side. Again, this is not mental per se. All right. Thanks, Sean, for just saw your comment about my daughter's rendering there. So, all right. Since exiting a trade too early, a fear problem, how can you manage that when other trades you hold when it goes against you, leading to losers, given the variability in the trade we take? Okay. I'm guessing that you're asking, like, is exiting a trade too early a fear problem? And again, the same thing is like you can exit a trade early for lots of different reasons. Okay. How can you manage when there's other trades you're holding and they go against you, leading to losses? I mean, again, if we're talking about a fear of losing, right, the way that you deal with that is to isolate the individual performance flaws that are associated with that, right? And those, I've mentioned this a few times, right? Like, what am I talking about with these performance flaws? Okay. You could have high expectations. Okay. Now, high expectations in and of themselves are not a problem per se. Okay. But they can become, they can cause self-inflicted wounds. You might have black or white thinking, an illusion of control, an expectation to have every day be green, an expectation for every trade to be profitable. And you might have like kind of the conscious knowledge that says, well, yeah, no, all of that stuff is irrational. Like I would never sort of consciously think that way. And you'd be right to kind of make that assertion, right? The problem is that these things kind of operate in the background and they bubble up, and we see that they bubble up based on, the thoughts that you have in the moment, the emotions that you have, right? In this case, fear. the changes in how you're perceiving these positions. And so what you have to do is sort of take all those signals and kind of do the backward, kind of inverse deduction here to figure out what's at the root of it. What is that performance flaw at the root? I think I saw actually this question earlier about the mental hand history. Forget where it is now here, but yes, in the book, the mental hand history is exactly laid out as I did, within the poker book. And the mental hand history, for those that aren't aware, is basically like my 5-step process for taking the problem and digging down into the root so you can isolate the problem and then know how to fix it, right? Because too often what happens is like, here's the surface level problem, right? Like this fear of losing or, risk aversion or, closing positions too early, whatever those issues are. And then automatically we're looking for a solution and we kind of do battle here, right? But the reality is that these underlying performance flaws need to be isolated, right? So you dig down in using the mental hand history, you find the flaw, and then that is what you are correcting. So you're not doing battle up here, you're doing battle at the level of where that flaw exists. That is how you solve these problems. That is how you resolve them. That's really what you're looking for. And, the book is really designed to do that. And on that topic, the biggest mistake that I made with the poker book is that I did not make that topic of resolution front and center. And so that was really like kind of what happened with this, kind of rejiggering of how the book was laid out. It was like, the book is about resolution. The book is about solving problems because that's what the system is designed for. That is what makes it unique. It's a very efficient method to achieve resolution, which means the problem is gone. Okay. It doesn't mean that your emotions are gone, right? We're not after trying to be robotic or numb. Okay. That's not the optimal here, right? Emotions are just the signal of those problems. So how you work through that, it is very well sequentially kind of laid out in the book now compared to the poker book. It was kind of buried. The mental hand history wasn't really called out in the way this book is. There are lots of examples throughout the book of mental hand histories, right? Because that's the tool that we use to solve and resolve these issues. So, there's going to be a lot of repetition and you're going to train your mind on how to think about problem solving in this way. And it will fundamentally kind of open up, the way that you go about solving these problems. And that should be freeing in some regard. Like, because if, as I said earlier, some of the big problems that traders have in my mind is just the way that they're actually going about solving those issues, solving their problems, then if you change how you solve problems, then it should be a lot easier to do that. And so yeah, that was the biggest mistake that I made in the poker book. And I'll be honest, my realization of that mistake came because of all the feedback that I got, right? Whether it was Twitter messages, whether it was emails that I got about people inquiring, they weren't necessarily giving me direct feedback on the book, but they were, the questions that they were asking, the things that they were saying, sometimes to other people, or I would get, reviews and it became very clear that the bigger message had gotten lost, right? I did not make it front and center. It was my mistake, didn't know any better. I'm not blaming myself. I'm just saying I learned from it, and I learned from it because of the feedback that I got. So I really, if you follow me on Twitter, you're going to see it endlessly where I say, please let me know what you think. And I mean that genuinely because it's how I learned to be better. If we operate in a silo and there's not the opportunity to get feedback, it becomes more difficult to learn. And yes, everybody has some biases about their perspective, but at the end of the day, patterns emerge and there's lessons to be learned. So, and frankly, another big upgrade in this book is the way that I've handled the client stories. Right. One of the things that one of the feedback that I got from the poker book was that people sort of kind of criticized my use of those stories as a way of kind of highlighting me and making, it about me and saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I get that. I mean, it wasn't my intent, but, at that stage in my career, I was trying to prove myself. So I think that was sort of subconsciously represented in the way that these stories were told. Now, not only are these kind of client stories like woven into the fabric of the chapter, right? They're not like kind of called out separately. It just kind of flows. The clients are the stars, right? They're the ones that did the work, and I'm kind of the one in the behind the scenes, who is providing the advice and providing the feedback that helps them to make the changes that they needed to make. And so, yeah, like I felt a lot more competent and a lot more confident about what I was bringing to the table. And so, yeah, I think that was a big change too. But, again, the summary here is really all about the feedback. And so please send me emails, post reviews on Amazon or elsewhere. Send me messages on Twitter, post your messages in YouTube videos. I'm definitely going to try to be doing more stuff on YouTube. But please give me feedback, because I appreciate it. I learn from it. I'm going to be learning for, a lot longer. I've got a lot left in my career of what I want to accomplish here. So to me, this is kind of just the beginning of another phase. So please, give me feedback. All right. We're kind of getting, I know I didn't put a time frame on this, but I'm kind of left it open. I wasn't sure if anybody was going to show up, as I said. So, but I got to relieve my, get my daughter here in about 10 minutes. So we'll kind of wrap up a little bit here. Elliot, I apologize, man. I'm actually not taking new clients at the moment. If you want, just go to the website. There's a little form you can fill out, and I can add you to the wait list. Brandon, thanks, man. I'm excited this book is out too, and glad you're excited about it. Are there any warm-up exercises that you can recommend traders should do before trading on the same day in the morning before starting trading? Yes. So chapter 9, talk about building a productive routine. For me, there's a lot of, kind of material that exists in the trading space already. So I wasn't kind of reinventing the wheel here, but in large measure, I think of traders as athletes, and that's the world that I came from as a golfer. So, I just think about, okay, what are the things that you need to do to get yourself physically prepared, mentally prepared, and ready to compete at a high level? That's stuff you need to kind of work out and figure out some of the variables that are associated with it. But I think the things that tend to get missed the most as it relates to routines is the necessity to prepare yourself to do battle against the common mistakes, the common flaws that you're going to experience when you're trading. And you need to be able to identify and develop a strategy for you to be able to do that. And so in your preparation, you want to be reviewing that. You want to be looking at the injecting logic statements, maybe reviewing mental hand histories, and really kind of getting yourself ready to go do battle. And then afterwards, right, you need a good cool down routine too. Just like athletes are going to go and, ice down their muscles and stretch, and again, effectively, like a cool down is preparation to do it all again and recover. There's processes that are associated with that, and they're laid out pretty cleanly in the book. So I would say just kind of add to what you're already doing. Don't try to reinvent the wheel all at once. You do too much too quickly, and it's just not going to stick. To me, it's all about taking incremental steps until you kind of put all the pieces together. Audiobook. I am the narrator. I don't know when it's going to come out. It's all recorded and uploaded. I'm just waiting for the audiobook distributor to just kind of give the thumbs up and press play. They said up to 30 business days. So we're at day 7 now. I'm definitely kind of checking it every day, but as soon as it's available, I'm going to just blanket all my channels here, and you'll know about it. Do you include in the book ways to deal with toxic environments or people? I do not directly, but because the book is really all about kind of your own individual issues. And when we look at toxic environments, one of the big things that occurs is that toxic environments draw out your weaknesses. Okay. That's the stuff that you want to be looking at first. I actually meant to say this earlier when I was talking about the pandemic, which was really kind of the main point of even bringing it up, because I know it was difficult for a lot of people, especially, psychologically, where we were more isolated. And so what happens in a pandemic when you're more isolated, these problems that occur, is that our problems get bigger, right? The psychological issues that exist tend to get bigger because the ways in which we tend to deal with those problems have been removed. A lot of times it's going out with friends and blowing off steam, or going to the bar and having a few drinks, or going out and playing soccer or playing basketball, or whatever you would do to kind of normally blow off that steam. You didn't have that outlet in the same way. And so what happens is the equivalent of a downswing, or a drawdown, or a run bad, whatever you want to call it, high concentration, emotional issues come out, and they're bigger. Toxic environments, toxic people do the same thing. Okay. If somebody were to say, you are a purple dinosaur from the planet Blue Blob, they would just, you would just look at them like they're a lunatic, like it doesn't make any sense, right? But when somebody says something to you, or when the environment, is affecting you deeply, it usually means that there is some weakness in you that is getting exposed, right? Because if what's going on is as insane as what I just mentioned, but on a constant basis, I mean, you're going to question why you're even there. But my point is more that strength, right, automatically creates a buffer for you to deal with those particular problems. So I would actually look at it the other way around. I would say, okay, I'm not saying that these people aren't necessarily problematic, or that it's, the most healthy environment for me to be in. But since I can't control them, and I'm here, how can I best utilize the situation to my advantage? And the way to do that is to just kind of put the mirror kind of back on yourself and say, how can I better understand how I am being affected by this environment? Right. This is something I dealt with a lot with esports, where we're talking about team environments, and to a lesser degree in the institutional space, where, kind of traders are with each other, but toxic players affecting the team environment. And this is what I said to them as well. It's like, look, this guy can do that. We can do our best to help him, to be better and perform better, and to be more in control, and to deal with these issues. But if he's affecting you in these ways, how is it affecting you? And let's look at that as a weakness to be addressed and solved. So, I'd say that's kind of the best way to deal with it. So, all right, y'all. Here she is. Really happy that this sucker is out. I've been sprinting. I'm gonna take a little rest tonight. Hopefully, get a good night's sleep and be back at it tomorrow. Working hard, but I'm excited that she is done. I'm excited that it's out. I'm excited to hear what you guys think. I appreciate you joining me today. It's been awesome. Thanks for all your great questions. Participation was really cool. Like I said before, this is kind of the beginning point for me within the trading space, and really in doing more in general, right? Like whether you're a poker player, or you're, somebody in esports, or another athlete, or working in another profession, the material applies. And I'm just going to be doing more, really kind of working to grow my platform, and my ability to reach out and help more people. So, expect more from me. And I hope that I can get more from you in terms of feedback, because that's how I can help you better, right? We'll, help me help you sort of scenario here. So, adios everybody, be well, and talk to you later.